Welcome back to the show as we close out 2025, and thank you for listening to Mic'd Up with ChiroUp. We are now one of the top podcasts in the chiropractic profession, and we appreciate every one of you who tunes in to sharpen their skills and elevate their patient outcomes. Today's episode, so I was writing this one out and doing the title, and I was like, man, I don't know if I would even listen to this episode. It's on the straight leg raise, and I was thinking to myself,
riveting.
Well, I know, and I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh man, that's a tough one to get people excited about.
I've thought that about a lot of your podcasts,
But we're going to cover three major topics. And what I try to do with this one is to cover what really affects chiropractors every single day, and then to shed a little bit of light and to modify these things and make you think a little different and maybe try a little something different in practice. So yes, first we are going to dive into the straight leg raise, an orthopedic test that we all know. However, we are going to give you a simple way to make this test dramatically more useful. You and I use this multiple times a day. However, Tim and I are going to walk through a simple thought process and maybe some details that maybe some of us aren't doing with this test that really is going to differentiate how symptoms are elicited and where they're actually coming from, which is going to give us all a little more confidence in knowing that what we're treating is real and we're treating the right spot. Second, we're going to share a quick message about a brand new integration, which is Aloha, that went live about a month ago within the ChiroUp EHR. I've been wanting to talk about this one for a long time. The integrations have actually been done for a while, but we wanted to make sure it went through a beta clinic, actually several beta clinics, and really has been a game changer for these types of practices that use Aloha, or what we used to call Review Wave. And then finally, we're going to wrap up the conversation about knee osteoarthritis, which is just another one of those riveting topics that we want to talk about, but it's going to bring to light a thought process in rehabilitation that I think is extremely important. We just use knee osteoarthritis as the primer to kind of get into that conversation because I did find a fantastic article on closed kinetic chain exercises. And I want to make the case on why we need these things and how we need to maybe transition people out of the easy exercises and get them into more difficult exercises. So yes, there is a little something for everybody, a little research, a little orthopedic testing, some treatment talk, and of course, a quick update on the EHR and how it continues to evolve and kind of meet our needs of every unique need of a subscriber. With that being said, Tim, the master of orthopedic testing, the guy who can deliver 16 hours of content on really any topic, nearly every single weekend he's out there talking with the different state association. Let's go through one of the more common tests, and so you can kind of describe it, and then we can kind of build off that. So what is the straight leg raise?
Well, the great news is it won't take all 16 hours to go through this. This is going to be really quick. We all know the straight leg raise. I'll talk about it very briefly, but more importantly, why the extended straight leg raise, or the ESLR, is even better. So first, we all know the straight leg raise. It's also Leseg's test. It's one of the most widely used tests for all of us. We use it when we think there could be a lumbar radiculopathy. We know the patient's lying on their back and we're going to passively lift their leg. And it's positive if we reproduce the radicular complaint. That's the one key, is we really want to document what's it producing. Is it reproducing hamstring tightness? Is it reproducing localized back pain, hip pain, or is it radicular? Because we're looking for radicular complaints, especially in that 30 to 70 degree of hip flexion. And what it means is that there's irritation to the L4 or the L5 nerve roots. Remember that most disc lesions and degeneration, most radiculopathies and problems in general affect those two lower levels. 90% of lower back problems affect one of those two levels, and we know that as practicing chiropractors. The straight leg raise is going to target those. We're not going to get the L3 or the L2. That's going to be a different test, where we're going to do a femoral nerve stretch test. But when we see that's positive, now we know there's some sort of irritation to the dura. There's a disc herniation. There's a lumbar radiculopathy. Really, it's an early screen for sciatica of neural origin. And we'll also see it could provoke other things, other pseudosciatica type things like a piriformis syndrome, but usually that's not going to be a radicular complaint. So again, documenting what did it produce. Was it discomfort, or was it this sharp dermatomal pain that shoots down below the knee like a lumbar nerve root irritation would?
So I guess I can ask the next question. The next logical question, I guess, is what can we use the SLR for? Because what I'll see often with people I consult with is if the SLR is positive, we adjust the back. If the Bragger's test is positive, we adjust the back. If Faber test is positive, we adjust the hip. So while manipulation is powerful, and it's one of those things that is obviously going to be incorporated in a lot of the recipes that we treat, just because these tests are positive, it doesn't mean that the knee-jerk reaction is automatically to adjust the area of the spine where it comes off from. We kind of need a little bit more information. And to be honest, just because the SLR lights up like a Christmas tree doesn't automatically mean the sciatic nerve is throwing a tantrum. Yes, it 100% could be the nerve, or it could be literally anything else in the lower body that decided to ruin that person's life that day. So we really have to understand where things are coming from, because the patient often has a different idea of where things are coming from, especially in the neurologic world. When you see a patient and they look you dead in the eyes and like, well, I think I inherited this from my mom's grandmother's second cousin removed cousin's hip. They had sciatica also. That's probably where I got it from. We have to be able to do a couple little tests and say, maybe it was your second removed cousin's hip, but maybe it was the activities you do, the hobbies you do, the habits you do, because reality, just doing the SLR is a starting point. It's a way to figure out whether we're dealing with true neural tension or just an outrageously tight, posterior chain, a hamstring issue, like you brought up, a piriformis issue, or maybe it's lack of sleep, or maybe they need a life coach on how to get up and be a little more active.
Yeah, the SLR helps us determine whether that radiating leg pain is coming from a nerve tissue like a disc or a nerve root or dura, or is it a musculoskeletal tissue like a hamstring or a hip joint. And while that test is pretty sensitive, it's not always specific, which is why there is something better. And I know you covered the sensitivity specificity saga before. That was in a podcast. And if you haven't caught that, you'll want to re-listen. That was a good one. It's really a fifth grade refresher on how orthopedic tests work and why the stats behind them make everyone's head hurt. Basically, Orthopedics 101, but with crayons from Brandon. So I want to talk about
what you did there.
Another variation of the test. And that is the extended straight leg raise. So I have two questions. Number one is why did orthopedic tests not typically get invited to parties?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know.
Every time they show up, they start provoking people. Number two is, what is the extended straight leg raise?
Hopefully we can edit that one out of the live version of this podcast. No. The extended straight leg raise. In all honesty, when this one came out, I forgot which.
The dad joke?
The dad joke came out a long time ago. I think it was 2019. I'm probably wrong on that. I can go back and look. But I was a little bit intrigued when I saw this test because it starts off just like the SLR with Bragger. So with the ESLR, the clinician, or you, is going to progressively lift that supine patient's straightened leg until you produce symptoms. And then once you reproduce symptoms, you drop it a touch. And then to force a little more neural tension, you can also you can perform Bragger's test with ankle dorsiflexion to increase neural tension. But here's the issue with that. So if you have a peripheral issue in the lower leg, down in your calf, and you do Bragger's test, well, technically you're tensioning the calf and the nerve at the exact same time. So what the ESLR says is that if you have lower leg symptoms, don't do Bragger's test. So instead, do the SLR, bring the leg up to feel symptoms, and then instead of doing Bragger's test or ankle dorsiflexion, instead what you're going to do is you're going to tension the nerve from above. And the way you're going to do that is through hip internal rotation. And when you perform hip internal rotation, it's going to stress the nerves. And if that reproduces lower leg symptoms, then we know it's of neurologic origin because you're not stressing the muscles, the tendons, the fascia, and the lower leg when you do that. So this test highlights the issue with the SLR plus the Bragger's test, because if you reproduce symptoms in the same area that you're stressing musculoskeletal tissue, it leaves a level of uncertainty on which system is reproducing symptoms. But if you use the ESLR properly, you can make this differentiation.
So basically, recapping, let me make sure I have it straight. This is really simple to perform.
Let me get those crayons out again.
They're all nubs by this point. Really easy test. Research shows that it outperforms the traditional straight leg raise on almost every meaningful metric. And why it's better is because it's location specific. So you can differentiate what structure by doing either ankle dorsiflexion or hip internal rotation.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing is that one, location of symptoms, but we also know the validity. And the validity of doing the ESLR test, detect neural symptoms, is strongly associated to the same amount as really the SLR, and also as compared to an MRI. So it's a very a specific test. But the number one thing associated with this test is the differentiation, is that this is a reliable and repeatable tool to discern neural symptoms from musculoskeletal symptoms, and it's better than the standard SLR plus Bragger test. So in other words, it's going to help you determine exactly which tissue is generating the pain, not just whether pain exists. And this is really the correlation of sensitive and specific test. I think in that last podcast, I talked about the drop arm test, and really the SLR reminds me a lot of the drop arm test for which we'd use for a supraspinatus injury, or essentially a rotator cuff problem. Well, if you do the drop arm test and it reproduces shoulder pain, that means about any number of 20 different kind of diagnoses that can give you that symptom. So it gets you in the right neighborhood, but it really doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong with that person, or essentially the source of symptoms. So that's when we can use the ESLR to help differentiate where the problem is coming from. And this is important because, one, we kind of take our exam findings and turn those into our treatments. Let's make sure we're treating the right area. But also it helps you differentiate where to send someone else for maybe an orthopedic evaluation, or where to order an MRI, or how to write a referral for a neurologist if things aren't going your way as far as that neurologic symptom. So by knowing which area is causing the dural tension, or the leg tension, or the calf tension, it can help us point us in the right direction. If you want more information on the ESLR, there was a phenomenal blog that came out a couple of years ago.
I thought you did that one.
Yeah, you can search for my name. Or just search for the term ESLR. That's in the resources tab in ChiroUp. You don't even need a subscription. Just go to chiroup.com, go to resources, and you can access the blog from there, and it's going to give you a detailed explanation of this. Now, for those of you who are subscribers, go into ChiroUp, go into clinical evaluations, and you can access, I don't know how many orthopedic evaluations, several hundred evaluations on one, the ESLR, but every other area in the body. And there'll be a video. There's going to be a voice. Sorry for the voice that describes the orthopedic test. That's Dr. Bertelsman. And then also the verbiage and the references on where we get those specific orthopedic tests from.
Why do you have to be so mean?
You know what?
No need for that.
It's the podcast. We can go there.
The other nice thing is that the straight leg raise, or the ESLR, if it produces less pain, allows greater range of motion, shows delayed onset of symptoms, you have objective evidence that something good is happening, and that's what we need in our notes. The other great thing is that with a little bit of a tweak to this test, both of those tests can be almost treatment tools that we can use spinal mobilization and manipulation with movement, which essentially mobilizes the lower back as you take the patient through those orthopedic tests. And that's not going to work well to describe exactly how that goes. It's a little bit more complex. So again, jump into the ChiroUp clinical skills section and look in the treatments for spinal mobilization with leg movement. And you'll see a really easy way to modify this test into a treatment that really helps patients with not just back pain, but leg pain, and the overall outcomes and patient satisfaction. In fact, Archives of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation told us that patients who have spinal mobilization with leg movement had significantly better outcomes than the controls.
Yeah, I love this with nerve symptoms, and I know that one of our most popular talks, at least for 2025, have been the talks on peripheral neuropathies and nerve mobilization. So to get this straight, before we move on, performing the SLR or ESLR is important to help differentiate what we're treating, and with ESLR, where we're treating. However, the two lesser known or lesser appreciated or performed things with that test is, one, you can directly turn that into a treatment. But then I think probably the most underappreciated part of these orthopedic tests is the retest portion that you just talked about. So many of us go through and we detect segmental hypomobility, and then we adjust. Well, how many of you go back to that same section and make sure that joint is now moving properly? And that's the same kind of idea that we can do with the SLR, is do the SLR, treat them, and then go back and test that orthopedic test again. And what you can see is not only is their range of motion better, their pain's better, but these are all things the patient's looking for. And now you can objectively identify as the patient's walking out the door, hey, it hurt when you did this, we treated it, and now it feels better. So let's close that section up. I do want to drop a couple thoughts on a new feature of ChiroUp. This was a huge project, essentially, is opening APIs within an EHR is a big deal. Security, compliance, making sure you're working with reputable companies. We've done that with a couple people clinically, but this is our first in more of the business realm, communication realm. And ChiroUp is now fully integrated with Aloha. This is pretty exciting. I'm going to explain why. Is that at the very beginning, I was like, why would we integrate with Aloha? Because many of the features in Aloha, your appointment reminders, your digital intake forms, patient surveys, disability indices, your automated Google review requests, they're already built into our EHR at no additional cost. And obviously that's intentional. However, we had a lot of clinics who use Aloha for different reasons that they are phenomenal at. In fact, now that we have this integration done, we now have 15 clinics who are already using the integration. They love it because they use these services.
Yeah, it goes beyond what you would aim for in a typical EHR. So that's why we partnered with them. They bring in new things like two-way texting, which we don't have yet, mass text and mass email campaigns, powerful post-care marketing automation, so the drip campaigns of getting patients back into re-engaged states, and really just the engagement workflows that are really next level. They've been a great partner. This is, again, as you had mentioned, our first integration with somebody that's not just a clinical partner, but they brought some valuable tools for patients and clinics that really want the advanced communication and marketing tools.
Now, to be transparent, Aloha does come at additional cost, just as any other premium communication platform would. However, these tools, I should say, are vital to your practice, or if you're already using Aloha or any kind of similar platform, it's going to be seamlessly embedded in the EHR. Well, the best EHR ever created. That may be a little more of an opinion than a fact. However, that really is a core value to ChiroUp, that if we get feedback or suggestions on what we can do better, we obviously now pull that back, create the stories, and encode those things so we can be the highest rated EHR in the profession.
Yes, one of the things, just like you as a provider, you want to know what your clinical outcomes are. You're measuring those. We measure everything from onboarding satisfaction to customer satisfaction to net promoter scores. We believe, just like you do, that if it's important, we measure it, and we continually refine that. We've got over 250, at least as of today, and growing by the day, over 1,000 active users with the EHR, and then we've got 3,000 people who are using our communication platform. And we measure metrics for all of those on a regular basis. The other nice thing is that the patient education that you've grown to love, that's built into our original platform, is core into the EHR as well. So no more dual entry of information, seamless and simple.
Yeah, agreed. So that's kind of the end part of the EHR update, kind of the last big project of 2025. I'm super excited about what we're getting into. Let's call it that for 2026. But before we kind of finish up, I do want to go back into the research, because this was a subscriber, I guess, feedback, or I got an email about this, and why chiropractors should favor closed kinetic chain exercise for knee osteoarthritis. Now, to be honest, it was more on, why should we use closed kinetic chain exercise for everything? We're just kind of choosing some research articles about the knee and some specific pieces of that. However, this is one thing that I think we all understand in 2025 is we have to progressively load someone.
Yeah, and that's a common friction point, especially with advanced age patients, that most providers start with the usual open kinetic chain movements, those things like clamshells and straight leg raises, bridges, the classics. And those aren't bad. They're a decent starting point if the patient needs training wheels. But here's the problem, that knee OA rehab is more than isolated muscle work. These patients need dynamic stability. They need joint coordination, proprioceptive input, and really the functional movement patterns that translate into what they're doing all day, walking, standing, walking stairs, and just daily life. And that's where open chain exercises can fall short. So when you load the limb in a closed pattern, think squats and step downs, things with feet on your ground, and multi-directional lunges, you naturally create co-contractions across multiple joints and multiple muscles. The hip and the knee and the ankle all have to fire synergistically, and that produces a dynamic stability that we can't get with simple open chain exercises, especially in patients who have arthritis and they're trying to survive modern life. That's what they need.
Yeah, I 100% agree that co-contraction is key. And we're doing more than just building strength. We're not just putting someone on a machine and having them doing, leg curls to strengthen the hamstrings. When you are standing and performing functional tasks, you are stimulating mechanoreceptors. You're boosting proprioception. You're cutting down on shear forces, and you're really solidifying the motor programs or engrams necessary for the typical deliberate movements of getting in and out of a car or walking up steps. So essentially, close kinetic chain exercises train the knee to function in a real world integrated manner. And I always do this with my patients, and this is any lower kinetic chain issue, but I have them stand with a single leg stance. So stand up, on one foot. Can you do that for 30 seconds or not? Most of my advanced age, Dr. B age people, they can't do that. However, you can also have them close their eyes or close one of the three main proprioceptive inputs of the brain to see if they can do that. Make sure you put something close to them to hold on to, because they won't be able to do that. Because when you close your eyes, you're really starting to now depend on that proprioceptive and that co-contraction of all the lower leg muscles to literally not fall over. This one simple task, the single leg stance, is fundamental to walking. I mean, try walking with 2 feet on the ground at the same time. That's called standing. You can't walk, you can't jog, you can't run.
Should have brought a notebook.
This highlights the extent of deconditioning that our patients have, that we need to provide a new experience, a safe experience, start to get them stronger to allow them to do those tasks.
Yeah, and some more food for thought is that studies across multiple knee conditions, ranging from ACL reconstructions to our most common friend, patellofemoral pain syndrome, and eventually knee OA, those studies constantly show better improvements in pain and function when we incorporate closed kinetic chain versus open. And it makes sense. The more your rehab resembles real life, the more real life results your patient gets. We also know that functional task-specific exercise outperforms strength training alone when it comes to ADLs. And that's the goal for knee OA patients. We want them to walk better. They can go through the store. They can climb stairs. They can stand longer. They have more confidence and have less pain doing it.
So I guess the argument that I get from my advanced age people is that they don't quite understand that you have to go through a little bit of discomfort. But in reality, knee OA is a problem with movement. So why are we treating it with things or exercises that don't look anything like the movement? So close kinetic chain exercise is not just an option. It really should be the foundation for knee rehab, for OA or anything else. But start with the basics, get them to be on the ground and make sure they can understand how to activate muscles. But we should be progressing them towards close kinetic chain exercises as they're able to do it, so we can start to train balance and strength and stability and neuromuscular control, just like we just talked about. Our patients don't need more clamshells, they just need better movement. And if you're not already building close kinetic chain exercise into your rehab programs, you should, and now's the time. I can tell you right now, as far as an opinion, my favorite exercise to move people into is the double posterior lunge. It's just a squatting exercise in ChiroUp, but that's kind of my end goal with most of my patients. And then if I have someone who needs to be a little more functional, I'll get them into the semi-sit deadlift. Those are my two favorite go-to exercises. Tim, what are your favorites?
I think of it as that whole continuum of trying to go from passive to more active care, that we'll use modalities just to be able to get somebody to do something active, or I'll provide manipulation in order to hopefully get them into more functional. And sometimes I use that same philosophy when it comes to rehab, that if they need to start with an advanced clam and an open chain exercise so that their butt is strong enough to allow them to comfortably squat, we'll do that. But fairly early on, I want to incorporate things like hip hinge exercises, and then we can advance them to a hip hinge chair squat, and then we can advance them to more things. So trying to meet them wherever they are, and if they're not ready for some of the more advanced ones, at least finding something that fits into their their current capabilities.
So I hope there was something in there for everyone. We gave you a little bit of research, some orthopedic testing. We talked about some treatments, and more importantly, at least for us, is how the EHR is solving all these problems. But really, at the very end of the day, this has been a really fun year. 2025 ended out really solid with the EHR, with our new additions to our research team and the new functionality that we are coding not only for the EHR, but also for our historical program, the Essentials program, with new updates to that platform to make everyone's life a little bit easier.
Yeah, we started with a simple idea between you and I because of a failed case, and we wanted to make care faster and cleaner and more evidence-driven. And then 10 years goes by, and Essentials grew into this world-class platform. There were thousands, 3,000 chiropractors who used it and loved it because of their real-world feedback. And so we decided to embark on something much more, and that was building the EHR. And it's out, as most of you know. We know that our clinical SOAP is a significant strength, and we also know where we're going to focus next, and that's on speed and automation for billing, payments, scheduling, and the workflow tools that cut steps and simplify your day. That's where our team is going to be investing all of their energy over the next year. This year alone, we've been rolling out features at a very rapid rate, 24 in the last quarter, which if you look through other EHR logs, that's more than most produce in a couple of years. And each of those updates is guided by you with one goal, and that's to help you and your team work smarter and more profitably. We recognize that no software, no EHR, even the biggest tech companies launch perfect, but chiropractic has something that those other companies and other professions don't. And that's a profession full of people like you who are willing to build something together. Every feature request, every call that you make, every comment really helps shape this system that is designed by chiropractors for chiropractors. So whether you're already using ChiroUp or you're just exploring what's possible, I want you to know this. You're not adopting software. You're joining a movement to create the digital backbone that shows the world how effective our care can be and make our profession the undeniable best choice for patients and payers alike. We're grateful that you're here. We invite you to stay connected, keep sharing your feedback, and let's keep building something that lifts an entire profession.